Ducks quarterback Joey Harrington distributed Oregon stickers to members of the media as a reminder of how to pronounce the name of Hisham State. 21. 22. The stickers are sold by the University of Oregon bookstore. 23. History. Humans have inhabited the area that is now Oregon for at least 15,000 years. In recorded history, mentions of the land date to as early as the 16th century. During the 18th and 19th centuries, European powers and later the United States quarreled over possession of the region until 1846, when the U.S. and Great Britain finalized division of the region. Oregon became a state on February 14, 1859, and as of 2015 has more than 4 million residents. 24. Earliest inhabitants. Paul Showaway of the Umatilla tribe 1899. While there is considerable evidence that Paleo-Indians inhabited the region, the oldest evidence of habitation in Oregon was found at Fort Rock Cave and the Paisley Caves in Lake County. Archaeologist Luther Cressman dated material from Fort Rock to 13,200 years ago. 25. And there is evidence supporting inhabitants in the region at least 15,000 years ago. 26. By 8000 BC there were settlements throughout the state, with populations concentrated along the lower Columbia River, in the western valleys, and around coastal estuaries. During the prehistoric period, the Willamette Valley region was flooded after the collapse of glacial dams from then Lake Missoula, located in what would later become Montana. These massive floods occurred during the last glacial period and filled the valley with 300 to 400 feet, 91 to 122 m, of water. 27. Gemstone Oregon Sustan Eroct Hunderek Shelleregon Hairy Triton, Fusa Triton Oregonensis, Soil Jory Soil Ethernut, Hazelnut State Root Marker. State Quarter Oregon Quarter Dollar Coin. Released in 2005. Lists of United States state symbols. By the 16th century, Oregon was home to many Native American groups including the Chinook, Coquille, Kayoquel, Bannock, Kalapuya, Plymouth Klickitat, Molalla, Nez Perce, Shasta, Takelma, Umatilla, and Umpqua. 28, 29, 30, 31. European and pioneer settlement. Monument near Coos Bay, Oregon of Francis Drake's first North American encounter. Plaque by Oregon State Parks and Oregon Historical Society. The first Europeans to visit Oregon were Spanish explorers led by Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, who sighted southern Oregon off the Pacific coast in 1543. 32. Sailing from Central America on the Golden Hind in 1579 in search of the Strait of Onion during his circumnavigation of the earth. The English explorer and privateer Sir Francis Drake briefly anchored at South Cove, Cape Arago, just south of Coos Bay, before sailing for what is now California. 33, 34. Martin de Aguilar, continuing separately from Sebastian Vizcaino's scouting of California, reached as far north as Cape Blanco and possibly to Coos Bay in 1603. 35, 36. Exploration continued routinely in 1774, starting with the expedition of the frigate Santiago by Juan José Perigelandez, and the coast of Oregon became a valuable trade route to Asia. In 1778, British Captain James Cook also explored the coast. 37. French Canadians, Scots, Métis, and other continental natives, for example Iroquois trappers, arrived in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, soon to be followed by Catholic clergy. Some traveled as members of the Lewis and Clark and D'Estier expeditions. Few stayed permanently, such as Etienne Lucier, often referred to as first European farmer in the state of Oregon. Evidence of the French-Canadian presence can be found in numerous names of French origin such as Malheur Lake, the Malheur, Grande Ronde, and Deschutes rivers, and the Sitio La Grande. Furthermore, many of the early pioneers first came out west with Northwest Company and the Hudson's Bay Company before heading south of the Columbia for better farmland as the fur trade declined. French Prairie Beth Willamette River and French settlement by the Umpqua River are known as early mixed ancestry settlements. Fort Astoria, as established by John Jacob Astor in 1813. The Lewis and Clark expedition traveled through northern Oregon also in search of Northwest Passage. They built their winter fort in 1805-1806 at Fort Clatsop near the mouth of the Columbia River, staying at the encampment from December until March. 38. British explorer David Thompson also conducted overland exploration. In 1811, while working for the Northwest Company, Thompson became the first European to navigate the entire Columbia River. 39. Stopping on the way, at the junction of the Snake River, he posted a claim to the region for Great Britain and the Northwest Company. Upon returning to Montreal, he publicized the abundance of fur-bearing animals in the area. 40. Also in 1811, New Yorker John Jacob Astor financed the establishment of Fort Astoria at the mouth of the Columbia River as a western outpost to his Pacific Fur Company Winking Sad Smiley. 41. This was the first permanent European settlement in Oregon. In the War of 1812, the British gained control of all Pacific Fur Company posts. The Treaty of 1818 established joint British and American occupancy of the region west of the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific Ocean. By the 1820s and 1830s, the Hudson's Bay Company dominated the Pacific Northwest from its Columbia District headquarters at Fort Vancouver, built in 1825 by the district's chief factor, John McLullin, across the Columbia from present-day Portland. In 1841, the expert trapper and entrepreneur Ewing Young died, leaving considerable wealth and no apparent heir, and no system to probate his estate. A meeting followed Young's funeral, at which a probate government was proposed. 42. Dr. I.A. Babcock of Jason Lee's Methodist Mission was elected Supreme Judge. 43. Babcock chaired two meetings in 1842 at Champoeg, halfway between Lee's mission and Oregon City, to discuss wolves and other animals of contemporary concern. These meetings were precursors to an all-citizen meeting in 1843, which instituted a provisional government headed by an executive committee made up of David Hill, Alanson Beers, and Joseph Gale. 44. This government was the first acting public government of the Oregon Country before annexation by the government of the United States. It was succeeded by a second executive committee, made up of Peter G. Stewart, Osborne Russell, and William J. Bailey, and this committee was itself succeeded by George Abernethy, who was the first and only governor of Oregon under the provisional government. Also in 1841, Sir George Simpson, governor of the Hudson's Bay Company, reversed the Hudson's Bay Company's long-standing policy of discouraging settlement because it interfered with the lucrative fur trade. 45. He directed that some 200 Red River Colony settlers be relocated to HBC farms near Fort Vancouver, the James Sinclair expedition, in an attempt to hold Columbia District. Starting in 1842-1843, the Oregon Trail brought many new American settlers to the Oregon Country. Oregon's boundaries were disputed for a time, contributing to tensions between the UK and the US, but the border was defined peacefully in the 1846 Oregon Treaty. The border between the United States and British North America was set at the 49th parallel. 46. The Oregon Territory was officially organized on the 13th of August, 1848. 47. settlement increased with the Donation Land Claim Act of 1850 and the forced relocation of the native population to Indian reservations in Oregon. Black Exclusion Law. In December 1844, Oregon passed its Black Exclusion Law, which prohibited African Americans from entering the territory while simultaneously prohibiting slavery. Slave owners who brought their slaves with them were given 3 years before they were forced to free them. Any African Americans in the region after the law was passed were forced to leave, and those who did not comply were arrested and beaten. They received no less than 20 and no more than 39 stripes across the back if they still did not leave. This process could be repeated every 6 months. 48. Statehood. Slavery played a major part in Oregon's history and even influenced its path to statehood. The territory's request for statehood was delayed several times, as members of Congress argued among themselves whether the territory should be admitted as a free or slave state. Eventually politicians from the South agreed to allow Oregon to enter as a free state, in exchange for opening slavery to the Southwest United States. 49. Oregon was admitted to the Union on the 14th of February, 1859, though no one in Oregon knew it until March 15. 50. Founded as a refuge from disputes over slavery, Oregon had a whites-only clause in its original state constitution. 51. 52. At the outbreak of the American Civil War, regular U.S. troops were withdrawn and sent east to aid the Union. Volunteer cavalry recruited in California were sent north to Oregon to keep peace and protect the populace. The 1st Oregon Cavalry served until June 1865 post-Reconstruction. Beginning in the 1880s, the growth of railroads expanded the state's lumber, wheat, and other agricultural markets, and rapid growth of its cities. 53. Due to the abundance of timber and waterway access via the Willamette River, Portland became a major force in the lumber industry of the Pacific Northwest, and quickly became the state's largest city. It would earn the nickname Stumptown. 54, and would later become recognized as one of the most dangerous port cities in the United States due to racketeering and illegal activities at the turn of the 20th century. 55. In 1902, Oregon introduced direct legislation by the state's citizens through initiatives and referendums, known as the Oregon System. 56. On the 5th of May, 1945, 6 civilians were killed by a Japanese balloon bomb that exploded on Deer Heart Mountain near BLY. 57. 58. They remained the only people on American soil whose deaths were attributed to an enemy balloon bomb explosion during World War II. The bombing site is now located in the Mitchell Recreation Area. Industrial expansion began in earnest following the 1933-1937 construction of the Bonneville Dam on the Columbia River. Hydroelectric power, food, and lumber provided by Oregon helped fuel the development of the West, although the periodic fluctuations in the U.S. building industry have hurt the state's economy on multiple occasions. Portland, in particular, experienced a population boom between 1900 and 1930, tripling in size. The arrival of World War II also provided the northwest region of the state with an industrial boom, where Liberty ships and aircraft carriers were reconstructed. 59. During the 1970s, the Pacific Northwest was particularly affected by the 1973 oil crisis, with Oregon suffering a substantial shortage. 60. In 1972, the Oregon Beverage Container Act of 1971, 61, popularly called the Bottle Bill, became the first law of its kind in the United States. The Bottle Bill system in Oregon was created to control litter. In practice, the system promotes recycling, not reusing, and the collected containers are generally destroyed and made into new containers. 10 states, 62 currently have similar laws. In 1994, Oregon became the first U.S. state to legalize physician-assisted suicide through the Oregon Death with Dignity Act. A measure to legalize recreational use of marijuana in Oregon was approved on the 4th of November, 2014, making Oregon only the second state at the time to have legalized gay marriage, physician-assisted suicide, and recreational marijuana. 63. Geography. Crater Lake Oregon is 295 miles, 475 kilometers, north to south at longest distance, and 395 miles, 636 kilometers, east to west. With an area of 98,381 square miles, 254,810 square kilometers, Oregon is slightly larger than the United Kingdom. It is the 9th largest state in the United States. 64. Oregon's highest point is the summit of Mount Hood, at 11,249 feet, 3,429 m, and its lowest point is the sea level of the Pacific Ocean along the Oregon coast. 65. Oregon's mean elevation is 3,300 feet, 1,006 m. Crater Lake National Park, the state's only national park, is the site of the deepest lake in the United States at 1,943 feet, 592 m. 66. Oregon claims the Dee River as shortest river in the world. 67. Though the state of Montana makes the same acclaim of its Roe River. 68. Oregon is also home to Millens Park, in Portland. 69. The smallest park in the world at 452 square inches, 0.29 square meter. Oregon is split into 8 geographical regions. In western Oregon, Oregon coast, west of the Coast Range, the Willamette Valley, Rogue Valley, Cascade Range and Klamath Mountains, and in central and eastern Oregon, the Columbia Plateau, the High Desert, and the Blue Mountains. Oregon lies in 2 time zones. Most of Malheur County is in the Mountain Time Zone, while the rest of the state lies in the Pacific Time Zone. Geology and terrain. Mount Hood is the highest peak in Oregon. Western Oregon's mountainous regions, home to 3 of the most prominent mountain peaks of the United States including Mount Hood, were formed by the volcanic activity of the Juan de Fuca Plate, a tectonic plate that poses a continued threat of volcanic activity and earthquakes in the region. The most recent major activity was the 1700 Cascadia earthquake. 70. Washington's Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, an event visible from northern Oregon and affecting some areas there. 71. The Columbia River, which forms much of Oregon's northern border, also played a major role in the region's geological evolution, as well as its economic and cultural development. The Columbia is one of North America's largest rivers, and one of 2 rivers to cut through the Cascades. The Klamath River in southern Oregon is the other. About 15,000 years ago, the Columbia repeatedly flooded much of Oregon during the Missoula floods. The modern fertility of the Willamette Valley is largely the result. Plentiful salmon made parts of the river, such as Celilo Falls, hubs of economic activity for thousands of years. Today, Oregon's landscape varies from rainforest in the Coast Range to barren desert in the southeast, which still meets technical definition of a frontier. Oregon's geographical center is further west than any of the other 48 contiguous states, although the westernmost point of the lower 48 states is in Washington. Central Oregon's geographical features range from high desert and volcanic rock formations resulting from lava beds. The Oregon Badlands Wilderness is in this region of the state. 72. Flora and fauna. Typical of a western state, Oregon is home to a unique and diverse array of wildlife. Roughly 60% of the state is covered in forest, 73, while the areas west of the Cascades are more densely populated by forest, making up around 80% of the landscape. Some 60% of Oregon's forests are within federal land. 73. Oregon is the top timber producer of the lower 48 states. 11. 74. Typical tree species include the Douglas fir, the state tree, as well as redwood, ponderosa pine, western red cedar.